What if the most inspiring story about Albert Einstein is a complete lie? Seriously, we've all heard it. He was a terrible student who failed math. It's a comforting tale, right? It suggests that any of us can bounce back from a rough start. It's a story that makes genius feel accessible. It makes our own struggles feel like a secret sign of greatness. But the real story is so much more interesting. And it says something profound, maybe even a little disturbing, about the way we still do school today. I spent a week trying to learn like Einstein, and what I found is that the real failure wasn't his. It was the system that tried to stamp out his curiosity, a system that might not have changed as much as you'd think. Welcome back to Mentor's Mindset. All right, let's just rip the band-aid off. You've heard it 1,000 times. Einstein failed math. It's the go-to excuse for every kid staring at a bad report card. The only problem, it's totally, completely false. In fact, when a rabbi showed Einstein a newspaper clipping in 1935 claiming just that, Einstein just laughed and said, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus." So where did this myth even come from? Well, it's a classic case of lost in translation. First, when he was 16, he took the entrance exam for the prestigious Zurich Polytechnic. He was 2 years younger than everyone else, and while he absolutely crushed the math and physics sections, he failed the general knowledge parts. Like French and botany subjects he hadn't really prepared for. The other source of confusion was the grading system itself. In his early school days in Germany, A1 was the best grade you could get, but later at his school in Switzerland, the system was flipped. A 6 was the top mark, so when people later looked at his German report cards, they saw a bunch of 1S and assumed he was a terrible student, but here it is. His actual final report card from his Swiss school in 1896. Algebra, 6. Geometry, 6. Physics, 6, his lowest grade. A 3 out of 6 in French, a language he openly wasn't a fan of. The evidence is crystal clear. Einstein wasn't a bad student, he was an exceptional one, at least in the subjects that lit his mind on fire. But this just makes things more mysterious. If he was so brilliant, why do we have this picture of him as a rebellious misfit? Why did one of his early teachers reportedly describe him as mentally slow, unsociable, and adrift forever in foolish dreams? And why did he drop out of his school in Munich when he was just 15 years old? The answer isn't in his grades, it's in his spirit. Einstein's real failure wasn't about academics, it was a failure to conform. The German education system of the late 19th century was rigid, militaristic, and built on one thing: memorizing facts. It was a system that demanded obedience and rewarded students who could repeat information, not those who questioned it. For a mind like Einstein's, a mind that was already devouring college-level physics books at age 11 and imagining what it would be like to ride alongside a beam of light, this environment was torture. He called it a type of coercion that had a deterring effect on him. He wasn't a bad student, he was a bored student. His teachers saw his endless questions not as a sign of a brilliant intellect, but as a discipline problem. They saw him as lazy and disobedient. Things got so bad at the Luitpold Gymnasium in Munich that one teacher famously told him that his mere presence in the classroom destroyed the other students' respect for the teacher. The school suggested he leave, and Einstein, armed with a doctor's note citing mental exhaustion, was more than happy to oblige. He fled the suffocating authority of the school and went to join his family in Italy, a high school dropout. This is the real story. It's not about a kid who couldn't do math. It's about a genius who couldn't stand a system that tried to kill his curiosity. He famously said, "It is a miracle that curiosity survives formal education." This got me thinking, if the system failed Einstein back then, would our modern schools do any better? Our world is completely different, but in so many ways, school feels stubbornly the same. The focus on standardized tests, on cramming for the exam, on finding that one right answer, it all feels a little too familiar. So I decided to run a little experiment. For 1 week, I would try to learn like Einstein. I tossed out the lesson plans and the textbooks. I decided to live by his rules, follow relentless curiosity, study on my own terms, and lean heavily on imagination. I wanted to see if this approach could still work today, or if our modern systems would try to crush it too. My experiment had 4 core rules, all based on how Einstein actually worked. First, self-directed learning. Instead of a curriculum, I'd pick one topic that genuinely fascinated me and just go for it, using whatever I could find: books, documentaries, articles online. Einstein didn't wait for a teacher. He famously skipped classes to study the physics that truly interested him. Second, thought experiments. Einstein's biggest ideas didn't come from a lab, they came from his imagination. He'd create vivid mental movies like chasing a light beam to understand physics. So instead of just reading facts, I had to visualize them. I had to ask what if, and play out the scenarios in my head. Third, creative problem solving. Einstein didn't care about the proper way to solve a problem. He cared about understanding the deep core principle. My goal was to find unconventional solutions and focus on the big picture, not just follow a memorized formula. And finally, the most Einsteinian rule of them all: question authority. At every turn, I had to challenge the standard explanation. I wouldn't just accept a fact, I'd ask why. Why does this work? Is there another way to think about it? What assumptions are we making here? The stage was set. 1 week, 4 rules, and a journey into a subject I knew very little about: the bizarre and fascinating world of quantum mechanics. It was time to find out if our world has any more room for a mind like Einstein's. My week of learning like Einstein was chaotic, eye-opening, and honestly pretty frustrating. The first 2 days were a total disaster. Without the hand-holding of a textbook or a lesson plan, I was completely lost. I'd read an article, fall down a Wikipedia rabbit hole, and end up an hour later more confused than when I started. The questioning authority rule blew up in my face immediately. It turns out you can't really challenge an explanation you don't even understand yet. It was a good reminder that you need a foundation before you can start shaking it. But then something started to shift. I stopped trying to learn everything and focused on a single concept: quantum entanglement. I started the thought experiments. I pictured 2 tiny particles mysteriously linked across the universe. I imagined measuring one and tried to wrap my head around how the other could possibly know what happened in an instant. It wasn't about math, it was about building a movie in my mind. And slowly, amazingly, it started to make sense. The idea went from being an abstract fact to a tangible thought. This was the magic Einstein talked about, the joy of discovery he felt when he was on his own. The wins were huge. When I let my own curiosity be my guide, my engagement went through the roof. I wasn't just learning, I was on a quest, but the struggles were just as real. The modern world is an engine of distraction, and without a classroom bell to keep me in line, staying focused was a constant fight. I realized that Einstein's method requires incredible self-discipline, a skill that traditional schools, for all their faults, do try to teach. My biggest breakthrough came on day 5. I was stuck trying to understand wave-particle duality. Frustrated, I almost gave up and searched for a simple, dumbed-down video that would just hand me the answer. But I made myself stick with the method. I stepped away from the computer, went for a long walk, another famous Einstein habit, and just let my mind wander. And that's when it hit me. An analogy popped into my head, connecting the concept to something I already understood. It wasn't the right textbook analogy, but it was my analogy. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered discovery. I realized that the best learning I did all week happened when I was free to explore, to be confused, and to build my own connections. It was a powerful confirmation of Einstein's big complaint: real learning isn't about downloading information, it's about forging your own path to understanding it. This struggle against a rigid system isn't just an Einstein story. History is full of brilliant minds who clashed with formal education. Thomas Edison was called addled or stupid by his teacher and was pulled from school after just 3 months to be homeschooled. Steve Jobs dropped out of college, saying later that following his curiosity and intuition was far more valuable than the required classes he was ditching. Innovators from Ada Lovelace to Richard Feynman also had unconventional learning journeys that let their unique minds run wild. These weren't failures. They were brilliant people that the one-size-fits-all model of school just wasn't built for. They proved that intelligence isn't about compliance, it's about creativity, curiosity, and having the guts to think differently. So what's the real lesson from Einstein's supposed school failure? It's not that you can slack off in school and still be a genius. The real lesson is that his genius bloomed in spite of a system that tried to label him a failure. His story is a huge warning sign about the dangers of an education system that values obedience over inquiry and memorization over imagination. My little experiment taught me that while the tools are different now, that fundamental conflict is still here. Our modern school system, with its obsession over standardized tests, can still be a hostile place for a truly curious mind. It still risks sanding down the very quirks and oddities that lead to breakthrough thinking. The pressure to get the right answer fast often leaves no time for the messy, inefficient, and deeply personal journey of actual discovery. Einstein wasn't a misfit because he couldn't learn. He was a misfit because he refused to stop learning his own way. And his legacy leaves us with a critical question. Are our schools designed to create obedient test-takers, or are they designed to nurture the next generation of creative, curious, and maybe even rebellious Einsteins? So here's my challenge for you. Try just one Einstein method this week. Don't just study a topic, run a thought experiment on it. Don't just accept the answer in your textbook, ask why 5 times until you hit the rock bottom principle. Let me know in the comments what you discover. And if you believe that curiosity is more important than conformity, make sure you're subscribed for more videos that challenge the stories we think we know. Thanks for watching.